Field Defense Guard. So that means basically infantry skill set, but defending air bases. So I was a patrol commander and a weapons instructor for many years. And when I hung up my boots and rifle full time, I then went and studied psychology. And, it took me 8 years to become a fully endorsed organizational psychologist, which means that I take psychology and I apply it within organizations. So that's my area of specialty. And it's around a lot of leadership development, a lot of how do we get the most out of people in the workplace? What's the mindset that we need to adopt, or the environment that we can create in order to get the most out of people? That's where I love to play and spend a lot of my time. All right. And really that mindset piece is becoming more and more important in today's world. You think about the world we're in today, and there is so much going on, right? There is so much change that is happening. The pace of work just keeps increasing. The pace of change, the pace that we have to operate with to try and get through the workloads, which are just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And in all of that, right, there's so much information coming our way and so much that we have to deal with. The ability to harness our focus and get clarity becomes all the more important. It becomes like a superpower in today's modern world. And so we're going to spend a little bit of time thinking about what we can do to harness our focus, to really gain the clarity that we need to be strategically successful. And before we kind of do that, I want you to just close your eyes, right? Wherever you are, whether you're online or whether you're in the room there, I want you to just close your eyes and I want you to think about what would an increase of 10 or 15% more focus and clarity do for you? How would that change your work? How would that change your performance if you were 10 to 15% more focused and had 10% more clarity? And then what would happen if you multiplied that and so it was like 25%, or maybe you even doubled your focus in the workplace? What would that mean for you? What would that mean for your team and their performance? And what would that mean for overall hitting your numbers there in India as a region? You can open your eyes, but I just think, what would that mean for you? And if you thought about that, would it be good if we spent some time giving you some tools or some principles, some techniques that would really allow you to kind of multiply your focus, whatever level it is at currently. And I can't guarantee you that you'll double your focus, but what I can guarantee you is that if you are able to implement some of the tools that we talk about today and apply some of the concepts that we'll discuss, I guarantee that you'll get at least 10% more focus than you were previously. Okay? So keen to jump right into this. As I mentioned, I'm going to try and make this as engaging as possible. All right, so for those of you that are online, I'm keen for you to use the chat. If I say something really good, I'm a psychologist, right? I like feedback. So give me thumbs up, all right? Whether that's an emoji, whether that's in the chat, whether you're in the room and you just think it's really good and just stick the hand up, right? As I saw before, okay? I want to see this as engaging as possible. Now, I'll leave some time for some questions at the end, but if you do have questions and you're online, feel free to put them in the chat. I'll try and get to them as we go through as well, all right? So this is not necessarily just a sit and listen, all right? I'm going to try and keep this as engaging as possible. And I want you to start out just by thinking, about why do we need focus, right? Why do we need focus? Focus is really important, right? And the reality is that we need focus because people move towards what they focus on. We know this from psychology, all right? People move towards what they focus on. If they're focusing on something positive, they're going to move towards and find a whole lot of positive. If they're focusing on something negative, they're going to move towards the negative and they'll have a negative mindset and things will start to fall apart for them. But when we focus on what we want, amazing things can happen, all right? You know, I think about, I love this quote from Robin Sharma, all right? And it says that what you focus on grows, what you think about expands, and what you dwell upon determines your destiny. And I think that quote captures so much about why focus and having a good focus is so important, right? Even just that what you think upon grows. There's an actual little activity that you can do. Don't do it now, but do it after this presentation. And it is simply draw a dot on a piece of paper. Just the size of a coin, okay? Draw a black dot on a piece of paper and then just stare at it for 2 minutes. What you'll find is that if you focus on that dot enough, the peripheral senses will start to fall away and the dot will start to look like it's getting bigger. Now the dot's staying the same, but it looks like it's getting bigger because what you focus on grows, okay? And if you're focusing on the right things, then it all comes to pass. When we start talking about focus, you know, I often think about this analogy of the sun. See, the sun is the most powerful and most powerful source of energy in our universe. Not necessarily the universe or the cosmos. There's more powerful suns that are out there, but in our universe, the sun is the most powerful source of energy. And you know, every single day, at all points, it is just emitting trillions of kilowatts of energy in every single direction. And they come and they bathe the earth in all of that energy. And you know, when we go outside, it's not that dangerous to us. Yes, if we spend too long in the sun, we might get a little bit of skin damage, but it's not really that harmful for us. In fact, often we find it quite enjoyable to be in all of that energy that's being pushed towards us because it's in a really general direction. If we contrast that, however, to a laser, all right? Now, the energy source of a laser is actually much, much less, infinitesimal compared to the source of energy being the sun. But what's different about a laser is just those few watts of energy is really focused down into a laser beam and concentrated, and it can cut metal, it can drill a hole in a diamond, which is the hardest substance on Earth, right? And so when we think about, if we were to give, I guess, focus a bit of a definition, it's really around the energy that you invest in a particular direction. And you can either, you know, your energy, your attention, your resources, your time, you can project all of that in a very general way, and it's not going to have that much of an impact. Yes, you'll achieve a lot of things, but if you are able to harness it and concentrate it in a very specific, focused way, then you're going to have much more impact for the energy that you invest and expend. All right. And so there's kind of a bit of analogy around focus, but where does clarity come into the picture, right? What's the difference between clarity and focus, and why is that so important to strategic success as well? And when I think about clarity, clarity is so important because it allows us to be intentional. I often say that unless you can clearly articulate it, you can't be intentional about actioning it. And that's a universal principle. I challenge you to find an area of your life and an area of your work where that doesn't exist. And the analogy that I often use, right, because I was a weapons instructor, is shooting a rifle. You know, I can aim the rifle as best as possible and I can put it in the right direction and I can fire it in a focused way. But if I look through the scope on the rifle and there's no clarity around the target, I can't clearly see the target, then I'm not going to hit it, right? I can point the weapon in the right way. I can be as focused as I want to be on the target, but if I can't actually see the target clearly, I'm not going to hit the target. But if I have clarity around the target, then what I can do is I can make sure I am aligned and focused as well, and I will hit the target. And so clarity is really important because clarity, it allows us to make sure that we are focusing in the right direction and in the right way. Okay, so clarity is super helpful, and it is a partner to focus. All right, and so that's kind of a little bit just a kind of what are we dealing with here today. Okay, and once we understand that and lay the foundations, what I wanted to do with you is share 4 key principles around how you can harness your focus, how you can get clarity and maintain your success, or set yourself up for success. All right, does that sound good? Give me a thumbs up if that sounds good. All right, before we jump into each of the principles, I want to know that you guys are awake and listening to me here. All right. Okay, so principle number 1. Principle number 1 is, all right, focus and clarity require intentionality. Focus requires intentionality, okay? And, you know, if focus just doesn't happen by itself, particularly in today's workplace, we were talking about things are changing so often. There's so much information coming our way. Really, when we start talking about focusing at work in particular, right? It's where we put our energy, but it's really a big part of it is where we spend our time. And you know, there's this myth that goes around that James Clear talks about, all right? And he says that the myth is that there isn't enough time. The reality is that there is plenty of time. There just isn't enough focus with the time that you have, okay? The reality is we're never going to get more time than what we have right now. We just have so much to do, but do we have enough priority in order to be focused in the time that we've got? You know, if we are not intentional with our time, there's 2 things that happen, right? One, we get reactive, okay? We get reactive, and it's almost a bit like this painting that I've got in the background here. See, when it comes to our intentionality as to how we approach our work, when it comes to how we use our time, we've got choices that we can make. And if we don't make choices, well, we might end up in the middle of the storm where things are really rocky and we have to react to what's going on. We're being buffeted by all these external forces, okay? And we're not going to have a smooth sailing trip. We may not get to where we need to go, or at least it's going to be a really rocky journey to get there. But if we make some different choices, what we can do is we can start sailing in this direction here, where it's going to be smooth. We're going to be in control, right? It's going to be a whole lot faster to get to where we want to go. And it's going to be a much more enjoyable experience. All right. So first of all is if we're not intentional with our time and how we spend it, we're going to be reacting to a lot of the urgent things, not the important things, to other people and external forces trying to control our time. The second thing that happens if we're not intentional about how we spend our time is that we are going to get distracted. All right. We're going to get distracted. When we think about that, we end up wasting our time when we're distracted. Okay, there's time that we could use to do the really important work, but we end up wasting it. And that gets harder and harder with the many different distractions or the many different options we have in order to spend our time, right? So we've got things like these that are constantly in our pockets and in our hands, and we end up on social media and doom scrolling and doing all those things. We've got Netflix, we've got news articles available at our fingertips, or we've just got a whole lot of different things to do. And the reality is that unless you are going to be intentional with your time, you're going to lose the battle. Because here's the thing, right? Every day when you step into the workplace, you are fighting a battle. Do you realize that? You're stepping into or onto a battlefield. See, there's an army of people over in Palo Alto and the Silicon Valley. There's an army of people in China and an army of people in various parts of your country that they are some of the smartest minds in the world, and they are trying to design strategies in order to capture your attention and to use and suck as much of your time, energy, and attention into their device and their content as possible. And the reality is, if you don't have a strategy to combat that, then you're going to lose the battle. All right. So, what is your plan? What is your strategy to win the war for your attention, to win the war for your focus, to win the war for your time? Unless you have a strategy in place, you are going to at least be at a big disadvantage, but the likelihood is you're going to lose. All right. So really quickly, who spends too much time on their phone? All right, hands up. Hands up who spends, I'm going to put my hand up because I know I'm guilty of this as well, right? I put my hand up. I spend too much time on my phone. Who spends too much time watching Netflix? All right. Or other things. Well, we could go through all the different things, right? We waste time. Time that could be used for work purposes, or time that could be used for investing in relationships, spending time with our kids, or any one of those sorts of things. All right, more important purposes. So what we need to do, okay, first of all, is identify what's important to us. But then what we need to do is have a strategy to make sure that our attention and focus is being spent on the most important things. So we need to put a bit of a system in place, and we need to put a strategy. Now, we don't want to be too extreme in these, because some people could go to some pretty extreme lengths, right? Have a look at this. This is the isolator. This was a strategy that someone put in place to try and increase their focus. They've got a massive big hood on that cuts out all sound. They've got tiny little eye holes so that they're focusing only on what's in front of them. And it's even so isolated that they've got to have their own oxygen pumped into it, right? I don't know about you, but I reckon the strategy to remove the distraction in this case is probably more of a distraction than the distraction they're trying to remove. So we don't want to go overboard with that. But The first thing is we need to be aware of what our distractions are. Are you aware of what your distractions are? Okay. Now, I will often say we are controlled by what we're not aware of. Once we become aware of it, then we can choose to exert control over it. So my question to you is, are you aware of what your distractions are? What is distracting you? Because unless you are specifically aware of it and you write down a list of it, bring it to your awareness, bring it to the front of your attention, you can't be intentional about removing those distractions or making sure that those distractions don't inhibit the work that you're doing. Okay? So what are your distractions? All right, I want you to write them down. For those of you that are online, throw them in the chat. What are your distractions? All right, I'm keen to know what is distracting for you. So is it your phone? All right. Is it a dirty desk? Is it your email notifications popping up every 5 minutes? Right? What are the things that distract you from your work? Did you know that if you have just your phone sitting on your desk, that is a distraction for you? Just having it there, you don't have to be doing anything with it. You don't have to, it doesn't have to go off or anything. Just having it within your visual field, the research and the science tells us that the level of focus and the depth of focus that you can get to is not going to be as great as if the phone wasn't in your visual line of sight. All right. So one thing that people can do is you can put your phone away, whether it's in your pocket or it's in your drawer, in your bag. If it's outside your line of sight, it's not going to be a distraction to you. The research would also say is that if this goes off, there's a notification, a ping, a message arrives, an email gets sent, and your phone either vibrates or makes a noise, even if you don't pick it up and look at it, there's what we call a 20-minute attention deficit residue. So it takes you 20 minutes to return to the same level of focus as if, or before the phone went off. Okay? And so if you want to do some really focused work, you've got to be able to remove some of those distractions. Okay, some of you got here your phone. Yeah, look, there's a whole lot of people saying your phone is a big distraction. It is. There are amazing things, but they can be so distracting as well. Vidge is saying smartwatch. Yeah, so I have a watch that is connected to my phone and I can get notifications on it and those sort of things. But if I'm doing really deep work and I need to be really focused on something, I'll actually take my watch off. Okay, so that when it vibrates, it's not actually going to distract me from the work that I'm doing. All right. And we got social media here is another one that people have said is a big distraction. So once you've identified those distractions, then you can sit down and go, all right, if you jotted them all down on a page in a list, right next to them, you go, what's the thing that you can do to remove the distraction? And it might be to put the phone away, right? If it's email popping up, well, hey, let's get rid of all the notifications. Okay, when you then go into your app and your inbox, then you can see all the emails that are there. The reality is that if someone's emailing you, it's not as urgent as what you think it is. If something is really urgent, they will pick up the phone and call you, right? And so we think we've got to be online and we've got to be connected all the time. But if we're doing that, then we can't actually do any of the work, and we spend more time, our focus and our attention is on our email instead of the work that's actually going to help us achieve the strategy, all right, or achieve the revenue or the targets or whatever it is that we need to do. And so, all the productivity experts out in the world and all the science and the research around productivity says that it's best practice to kind of block out times to do email. And then once you've done that, close your email app down, right? Shut it off. And then do your work, spend 2 hours doing a block of work, whatever that consists of, and then have another half an hour block to attend to email, right? Now you've got to figure out what works for you in your kind of context there. But if you can batch your email processing together in chunks and then get rid of the email and focus on your work and get the work done, you'll get to the end of the day and you'll have will have been so much more productive. Okay? But really what we're talking about here is a personal focus system, because we don't rise to the level of our goals, we sink to the level of our systems. Okay? So what's your system? What's your strategy? What's your plan to enhance your personal focus? All right? And so the other area, right, where we start talking about focus requires intentionality is, what's the environment that we're creating? Are we as leaders in our business, are we creating an environment that makes it easy for people to focus? Are we creating an environment where there is a high degree of clarity so that people are focused on the right things in the right way, so that they can be intentional about the work that they do, right? That's our responsibility as leaders, to create that environment. So are we being intentional about how we really foster the collective clarity, the collective focus for our teams? All right. And to do that, I reckon there's 6 conversations that you need to have in order to boost the clarity for your teams. Now, I'm not going to go through all 6 of them today. I'm going to go through 3 of them now. But what I do have at the end of today is a resource for you to download. And that covers all 6 of them, right? So I'm not going to leave you in the lurch there. You'll get all 6, but we're just going to cover 3 of them right now. Is that okay? Give me a thumbs up if that's okay. I want to see that you're paying attention. You haven't fallen asleep on me after you've, I'm sure, had a decent lunch and you kind of got that mid-afternoon slump coming through. All right, so here we go. We've got, all right, 3 conversations, 3 clarity conversations that you need to have. And the first one is the big picture conversation. All right. Your people need to understand the big picture. If they don't understand the big picture, if they don't understand what they're doing and how that contributes to it, they can't be intentional about the way that they do their work. Okay? Here's one of the things. We often, as leaders, we want to know how to motivate our people. Do you know what the quickest way to demotivate someone or compromise their motivation is to ensure that they have no line of sight, but of how their task, the work that they're doing, contributes to the bigger picture. Because otherwise, if they don't understand that, it's meaningless. There's no purpose to the task. All right? So do people understand how what they are doing on a day-to-day basis contributes to the bigger picture? All right, the success of the team, to the bigger picture of the organization, the strategy of the organization. When I'm leading teams, I will go around and I'll ask people, because I want every one of my team to be able to tell me, if they're asked, okay, you're doing this particular task, tell me, how is that advancing the strategy? What's the contribution to the strategic initiatives that we are focusing on at the moment? And I'll make sure that they are all able to understand how their work is advancing the strategy. Okay? And if I went round to each of your team members, a question for you. If I asked them, what are you doing right now? And how does that link to the strategy? Do you reckon your team would be able to, with confidence, give the same answer? And a lot of organizations, when I'm working with them, it's not the case. Okay? Now, what you also need to do from a bigger picture piece, right, is they've got to understand the kind of the marketplace, what's going on outside the organization as well, and why strategic decisions are being made. See, if you're trying to introduce some sort of organizational change or something like that, if they don't understand the bigger picture and the external forces that are acting on the organization and why they're not going to understand why the change is needed or required. But if they do understand it, they go, we're doing this because X, Y, and Z. All right. What you also want to do is empower your team to make sure that they can make the right decisions at the lowest level. All right. If they understand the bigger picture and what's going on, if they understand what we're trying to achieve with the strategy, and all of a sudden something changes in their patch and they've got to make a decision, you want them to go through the process of going, what is the best option right now that is going to advance the strategy and help us achieve our goals? Right? You don't want them to go, what's the easiest thing to do? Because so often that's not what's going to lead to strategic success. You want them to go, what's the best strategic decision to make right now at my level? And what's going to advance the company? Now, they can't make that decision unless they understand the bigger picture. Okay? So the first conversation we've got to have to create this environment where clarity is there and it fosters focus, we need to have the big picture conversation. The next one is, what's the success conversation? What does that look like? Okay? And the more specific you are, the more meaningful this conversation becomes. Okay? That's another principle that I'll often talk about. The more specific you are, the more meaningful you become. So what does success look like? What are the numbers that we need to achieve? What are the goals? What are the outcomes? So not just the outputs, but the outcomes, right? So an output is a number, but an outcome is a situation, a scenario, a impact or an effect that we have, okay? What is the effect that we want to have in this, and what does success look like from that perspective? Because again, if they are clear, just like shooting a rifle, if they are clear, they can figure out how they need to hit the target. If they have to make decisions, again, you want them to make the decision that is going to get them towards success, not the one that is the easiest. Okay? So we need to be super clear on what success looks like. And part of this conversation is the process towards success, right? Not just the outcome, the successful outcome, but what's the process we're all going to follow? What's the journey? Are we clear on that? All right. And the final conversation here, is the leadership style conversation. All right. And this is all about, well, hey, how do we work together? How do we make this leadership style work? All right. What are your expectations as a leader? Because your people can't meet your expectations unless they know what they are. So first of all, are you clear about what your expectations are for a whole raft of different things? The most common things that the work that gets delivered around the culture and the environment of your team. Are you clear about what your expectations are of your people? And then once you are, have you communicated those? All right. And part of this conversation is also around, it's a two-way conversation. It's around how does this work? Because leadership is a two-way street, right? As a leader, you've got to figure out, how do I get the most out of my people? And you've got to adapt your style to get the most out of your people. But your people also need to figure out, how do we get the most out of our leader? Okay, how do we empower our leader to support us as best as possible? And so they need to understand how you work. And so they need to understand what's going to capture your attention and what's going to, how do they communicate to you in the best way possible? And you need to talk to them about, hey, this is how you get the best out of me. right? It's this two-way conversation that's there. And when you're super clear on how do we work together and what's the leadership style that's going to get the best out of both of us, well, that's a pretty empowering place to be in at the end, okay? And see, one of the reasons why having these types of conversations, these clarity conversations, is so important is because it allows you to address things early and to stay on top of things. All right, if I move back here and we use the whiteboard for a little bit, if we draw a line here, okay, this is our expectations, or this is where we need to be going in the direction in order to achieve strategic success. Okay, if our team deviates from that, it's going to look a little bit like this. Now, if we are all clear about how we operate and we have these conversations, we empower ourselves and our teams to pick up deviations early. And we can have a small series of conversations to make sure that we stay aligned, all right? These small corrections continually. But if we don't address things early on, what happens is we get this really big deviation up the top here. And realigning to where we need to be becomes really difficult. The greater the deviation, the more energy and effort you have to put into it in order to get the alignment. And that's a distraction from what you need to be doing in order to have strategic success. Okay? You can avoid that distraction, the distracting deviation, by making sure you have small corrections continually over time. Does that make sense to people? All right? Give me a thumbs up if that makes sense. Because there's a lot of people who, when they kind of see this particular diagram, and they're like, ah, right. So I have allowed this particular deviation to go on for too long. I didn't address it straight away, and now that's become a real distraction, and it's taking a whole lot of time away from the work that I should be doing, the strategically important work. Okay. So my question is to you, of those three clarity conversations, okay, whether it's a leadership style conversation, whether it's a success conversation, or whether it's the big picture conversation, your teams, which one of those do they need to have, or do you need to have with them most? Which one would give you the greatest return on investment? Okay. So for those of you online, I want you to put it in the chat. For those of you that are in the room, just turn to the person next to you and let them know what conversation of those three do you reckon your team would benefit from having most? Okay. What do you reckon? Waiting for things to come through. All right, Vidge is saying the big picture conversation. Yeah, understanding the strategy, understanding the marketplace, and what's the environment that's driving the strategic decisions that are coming through. Okay, awesome. All right, and Anit says a big picture as well. So the big picture piece becomes really important. Yep. That sounds like the one that is most important for teams, all right? So have a think about what's the bigger picture. What are we trying to achieve, all right? What's the strategy? What's the different, the big picture? How does the work that we do on a day-to-day basis contribute to the execution of the strategy? Okay, awesome. Really good to see. Now, the other thing, before we move on, right, to the second principle around harnessing our focus, there's one more thing that we can do as individuals and collectively as teams to be really intentional about harnessing our focus. And that is our strategic thinking time. Okay? Our strategic thinking time. When in your week, and this is a challenge that I always put to executives that I'm coaching or I'm working with, when in your week is the 90 minutes or 2 hour block that you have set aside for strategic thinking or strategic work, for doing the deep work? See, so often we think about doing the work as doing, right? We just got to be productive and we got to get things done. We got to get emails answered. We got to get projects finished and all those sorts of things. We've got to make the sales calls. But in reality, we can get so caught up in the doing that we can deviate ourselves. We might not be going in the right direction or spending our time in the right way. And until we have space to stop and think and actually reflect on, hey, what are we doing? What's most important here? Okay, what's coming up and how can I be best prepared for that? Right? Are we doing things the best way possible here? Unless we have time to do that thinking, then we're not going to have the clarity that we need to be confident that we are doing the right thing, that we are focusing our energy on the right thing in the right way. See, he who outthinks you, outworks you. And this is sometimes a bit of a mindset shift that a lot of people and leaders have to make, is that doing hard thinking is more important than doing hard work, right? Thinking is work. And unless you can get the thinking right, you'll never maximize the output, the return on investment for your work. Okay, the only way that you can get the maximum return on investment for the work that gets done is to make sure that you've done the thinking beforehand. So as individual leaders, it's my belief that you should have time in your calendar to do that. Now that may require communicating to your team, your peers, maybe even negotiating with your manager, and sort of saying, well, hey, here's this time, all right? I need to protect it. So if you email me, I'm not going to answer. If you call me, right, unless it's a real emergency, I'm not going to answer because I'm locking myself away to do some deep thinking so that I have the clarity to do the best work possible. And then there's also times when we need to do that as teams. And we need to come together as a team and we kind of go, all right, cool, we're taking 2-3 hours, half a day, and we're just going to lock ourselves in a room and we're going to think about what's the most important thing, okay? Or we need to really solve this problem. We're going to spend time completely undistracted, completely focused on solving this particular problem, right? And do the thinking together in order to get the clarity you need to move the strategic dial on your success. Does that make sense? Seeing a lot of nodding heads going on, all right, which is good. Some thumbs up there as well. I like to see the thumbs up, which is good. All right. Every executive that I've worked with, bar none, that have successfully implemented their strategic thinking time in their week and they've set aside 90 minutes to 2 hours, they have come back to me and said it is an absolute game changer. See, on the battlefield, we talk about regaining and retaining the initiative. We want to be proactive and make the enemy react to us rather than us reacting to the enemy. And in the workplace, you want to be proactive with your time. You want to be proactive with your focus. You want everybody else reacting to you rather than you reacting to everybody else. So unless you protect your time, or you carve out time for that strategic thinking, you're not going to have the clarity that you need to be proactive and to retain the initiative. So super important. All right, let's keep moving here. Second principle, focus requires sacrifice. All right, focus requires sacrifice. And this one can be a hard one, right? This one can be a hard one. Every time that you say yes to something, you automatically say no to something else. Every yes is a no. And in reality, every single yes is a multiple of no's. Okay? Because you might say yes to one thing, but that means there are many different things that you are saying no to. Right? One yes equals a multiple of no. There was a quote at the beginning of last year that I read, and it haunted me. Okay? It kind of stuck around in my head and bounced around for months. And this is the quote. Okay? You are not focused enough unless you are mourning the things that you're saying no to. You are not focused enough unless you're mourning the things you're saying no to. All right? So I absolutely love this quote, because here's the reality. There are so many good things that we could be paying attention to. Things that would be exciting, things that we would love to do, things that would have a positive impact. All right? But we can't do all of them. We have only so much time. We've only got so much energy. We can only harness so much to focus, and we can't do all of them. And we've got to be okay with that. There are going to be things that we can't do that we wish that we could. For me, one of those things, I would love to learn to wingsuit. To either jump out of a plane or jump off a cliff and in a wingsuit kind of fly through the air, right? But I've made peace with the fact that I probably will never do it. And I will, that's hard for me to say, because I would absolutely love to do it. But in reality, it's not the most important thing for me. There's a whole lot of risk associated with it. There's a whole lot of time that would be required, that would be away from my family and my business. There'd be a whole lot of money and resources that could be better spent elsewhere. Okay, and so the reality is I'll probably never do that. And that makes me sad. Right? I would absolutely love to do it, but I'm not going to do it. And there's a part of me that mourns. All right, and see why this is so so hard for us in many ways is because that we feel loss more than we feel gain. Okay, so if we think about psychology here, and I'm gonna now let me go to this one. So I'm going to draw something here for you. If we draw this along here, and above the line, okay, we have pleasure, right? If we gain something, it's the pleasure that we feel. And I'll drag this over here so you can see what I'm writing. And below the line is if we lose something, it's pain. All right. So now if I was going to do this a different color, oops, what did I just do? So if I give you $50, I'm going to give you $50, okay? What happens is we get a spike of pleasure here. And so this here is kind of the degree of pleasure we get. And we'll just say that this is 10 pleasure points. Now, if I take $50 off you, right? So instead of giving you $50, I'm taking $50 off you. What the science and the research says, okay, is the amount of pain and the loss that we experience here would be 20 pain points. So we feel loss twice as much as we feel pleasure. Okay? Now, does that make sense to everybody? All right, just getting back to here. And so when we start talking about sacrifice, all right, that kind of hurts us. All right. When we experience a sense of loss and we're kind of like, oh, well, we're not going to do that, we kind of go through a grieving process. And if we actually scan the brain, the same areas of our brain will start to be activated as if we experienced physical pain. All right. So we actually feel pain at the loss of something, which is, I'm just kind of highlighting this because this is why the sacrifice piece is really hard for us. But if we are going to be focused, when it's going to require sacrifice, there's going to be a level of pain, a level of mourning that we need to go through. All right. And when I think about that, right, the broader that we spread, the greater breadth of or any breadth that we experience comes at a sacrifice's depth. Okay, we've only got limited resources, so the broader we spread them, if we spread them across a greater number of things, we have less that we can invest in any one of those things. All right, so we need to make decisions. And this is ultimately, our ability to do this will determine our success. So if we look at Steve Jobs says that focus is one of the keys to success, but focus doesn't come from what we choose to focus on. Focus comes from saying no to and ignoring the 1,000 really good ideas that we could make work in order to make the one that we do choose work. And that's been the success of Apple. And you listen to some of the interviews of Steve Jobs when he was still alive, he would say that some of the things that he is most proud of is Apple is the products that they could have invested in, but they chose not to. Because what that allowed them to, by choosing not to, it allowed them to invest all their focus into the products that became super successful. All right. So the question is, right, what are the right things to invest our time in, and what are the right things to let slide? And we've got to think about that from a couple of different angles. We've got to think about the strategy, and we've got to think about, well, what does the strategy say? In terms of the organization has said, this is what we're doing in order to achieve success. So we've got to align with that. And so we've got to think about, well, based on the strategy, what are the right things to focus on and what are the right things to sacrifice and let go? And we've got to be doing that continually. We've also got to think about perspective here. And this is almost away from work. This is a bit more of a life type thing. And we've got to gain perspective, and we've got to think, well, what are the right things that I need to invest in, and what are the right things I need to let go in life in general? And if we are investing all our time, energy, and effort and all our focus into our work, what happens at the end of our life? And we've invested no time in our family. Or we've spent so much time investing in our fitness or in our work that we've spent no time in our health and our fitness, and we're sick and we can't even do our work, right? And so we've got to get perspective around not just where we and the right things to focus on, but how much focus and how much energy we expend on those things. And so I reckon that one of the best ways to get perspective is spend time with the extremes of the human experience. It's to spend time with young children right at the start of their lives, and it's to spend time with old people. Okay? Your parents and your grandparents, if they're still around, or your neighbors, people who have lived life and they're at the end of it. And they'll be able to tell you kind of provide a level of perspective. And I reckon those two ends of the spectrum are really good at gaining that perspective. And so there are a couple of areas, right, to think about the right things. And I just wanted to ask you this question, right? What comes to mind for you if you were to increase your level of focus in the workplace? If you were to increase the level of clarity and harness the amount of energy that you have at work, what might you need to sacrifice? What plans and initiatives that could be really good do you need to set aside in order to increase your focus, right? Or what do you need to stop doing so that you can invest time in some things that might be a little bit more important outside of work as well? And we'll talk a little bit more about what happens outside of work and how that is important as well, okay? And so I just wanted to get you guys, I'll leave that one with you. You don't have to tell anyone there, but it's a bit of a question for you to chew upon, all right? All right, principle number 3. Are you ready for principle number 3? Give me a thumbs up if you are ready for principle number 3. Okay, oh, I've just put fireworks. There you go. Teams is doing its AI reaction thing. I hope you enjoyed the fireworks. I didn't mean to do that. But it's good to see some thumbs up there, ready for principle number 3. Here we go. What are we at? Principle number 3 is persistence. If you're going to maximize and harness your focus, you need persistence. All right, you need to keep on going even when it gets tough. There was do you guys know what rugby league is? It's a sport, it's a code of football. I'm not expecting many of you to know what it is, but over here in Australia, okay, we have rugby league, and it's particularly big in my state of Queensland here that where I live. And the most famous coach, rugby league coach in our in here in Australia and arguably the world for those countries that do play rugby league, is a guy named Wayne Bennett. And when he coaches, he's got a mantra, and that mantra is don't stop 3 steps short. Okay? And he would particularly do it when he's training his team and they're doing sprints from one side of the field to the other. What he notices is that some people will sprint, and as they get to the last 3 steps of the sprint, they'll kind of take the foot off the accelerator and they'll just kind of coast and jog over instead of sprinting right across the line. And so his principle is always sprint right to the end. Give effort, give focus to what you're doing right to the end. And I was thinking about this and I'm like, you guys probably don't know rugby league, so that analogy may not be as meaningful for you, but have a think about this one. If you're playing cricket, right, and you're running between the wickets, but you don't run right to the end, and you kind of stop 3 steps before you get to the crease, and you think, I'm safe, and you kind of just walk across the crease, what do you think happens? I've seen it far too many times when I'm watching cricket, is they get run out because they stopped 3 steps short. They didn't run as hard as they could right to the end, right across the crease. And it can be a bit the same in our workplaces, right? It can be really easy to be focused and excited and to generate clarity around the start of a project. But do we maintain that sense of focus right to the end of the project? Okay, or right to the end of the quarter, or right to the end of the year, whatever the end of is. Are we maintaining our focus all the way through? Or do we take our foot off the gas and we kind of don't pay attention and we start on something new, right? And there's no point at being focused for the first half of a project if you're not going to be focused at the end. Because for me as a leader, and for most executives that I work with, they would rather have 3 complete, finished, delivered, successful projects than 7 half-finished projects, none of which are completed, because people kind of took their focus off, right? And talking to PK, this is where last mile delivery becomes really important. Okay, I believe that that's some language that you guys might use over there a little bit. And so last mile delivery becomes really important. We need to focus right to the end. We need to persist with our focus in order to be successful. All right. And then we've got capacity. Well, before we move on to that one, right? Here's what the question that I want to ask is, where for you do you need to be more persistent with your focus? Right now, where is your focus waning because you're getting towards the end of something? Right? Is it a project? Is it a time frame? We're 2/3 of the way through the first quarter of 25, right? Have you kind of let your focus wane already? Do you need to push through to the end of the quarter? What is it for you? Where do you need to be more persistent in your focus? And I want you to write it down. You don't have to write it in the chat. You don't have to tell the person next to you, but I actually want you to write it down. Where do you need to be more persistent this year? All right, it's good to see everybody writing down for those that I can see. That is always good. Hey, final principle for you here, capacity. All right, we need to be really intentional about maintaining the capacity to focus. Because if we don't have the capacity to focus, all right, then it doesn't matter how much we try and focus, we just don't have the capacity to do it. Now, when I start talking about the capacity to focus, if we're going to focus at work, our ability to focus at work is determined by what we do outside of work. If we're going to harness our focus inside of work, we need to be really intentional about what we do outside of work in order to maintain the capacity to focus once we step into the workplace. All right. So here's the principle in this space. Your ability to express your character and employ your capability is determined by your capacity. Okay? So your ability to express your character. Now, your character is your identity, your personality, your psychology. It's who you are. So if you're going to express your character under pressure, it's going to be the very best version of yourself. That's what expressing your character is. Now, your capability is the sum total of your knowledge, your experience, your expertise. So it's everything that you bring to be able to do your work, okay? And so when we start talking about your ability to express your character, to be the very best version of yourself, and to employ your capability to do your best work, is determined by your capacity. What do we mean by capacity? Well, your capacity is your energy, okay? It's your ability to focus. It is your attitude, your motivation, okay? All of this internal resource that you have. And if you are not really intentional, and this kind of loops back into principle number 1, right, around intentionality. If you're not intentional about maintaining your capacity, it doesn't matter how hard you try, you won't be able to harness your focus to the same level. Okay, so if I was kind of there in person, and I'd have a bunch of cups with me, and I'd say, well, here's your capacity cup, all right, and every time that you do something at work, you're pouring out some of your cup, right? And I'll pour it into other things, and you might have a making difficult decisions or dealing with difficult people or answering email. So all these different cups, right? And every time you do one of those things, you're pouring out. And we all know that you can't pour from an empty cup. You eventually run out of capacity. And so what you need to be is intentional about filling your cup. And that happens outside of work, not inside of work. All right. So what do you need to do? What does the science tell us about how do we fill our cup? Well, the first thing we need to look after is our foundations, right? You guys know this already, but you need to look after your exercise, nutrition, and sleep. So exercise doesn't have to be in the gym and an hour every day. If you do 20 minutes, if you walk, just go for a walk for 20 minutes twice a week. Okay, so 40 minutes every week of walking. So 20-minute chats. You will start to get the benefits of it. You'll get better. You'll have greater focus. All right. If you eat healthy, really important. Really interesting. 70% of people live chronically dehydrated. They don't drink enough water. All right. So are you drinking enough water? Are you keeping your fluids up? If you think about your brain is the organ that is responsible for your focus. Okay. If it is dehydrated, you're not going to be able to focus. So does your brain look like a grape or does it look like a sultana? They're both the same fruit, right? One's just dried out. One's dehydrated. It's shriveled. And people often laugh when I say that, but they often find it a really useful metaphor to try and help maintain their nutrition and their hydration. Then we got sleep, right? Sleep is so important. It will maximize every high performance strategy you put in place. But it will also erode each strategy you use if you don't get enough. Okay? Did you know that if you get less than 6 hours sleep a night, or if you go one night with less than 6 hours sleep, your cognitive performance can drop by 30%, 1/3. And if you go 3 nights in a row of less than 6 hours sleep, for most people, their brain will operate at the same level as if they had a blood alcohol limit of over 0.05. And so that's the legal driving limit here in Australia. But essentially, if you're over 0.05, you're drunk, right? Now, most of us wouldn't dream of turning up to work drunk. But if you're not getting enough sleep, you may as well be. So the first thing that we need to do in order to harness our focus is make sure that we stay on top of these things. Now, the story that I actually tell, you might be able to see here, I've got a book that I wrote a number of years ago. And that particular book, when I was writing it, I decided I'm going to sacrifice my exercise and my sleep in order to get it written, just for a short period of time. So I was getting up extra early. I wasn't exercising. I was trying to write. 3 months into the process, I was a wreck. I couldn't focus, right? I was a low mood. I was unmotivated. I couldn't be productive in anything that I was doing. I was snapping at my kids. I wasn't a very nice person to be around. Now, I went and saw a psychologist and we started working together to get back on top of things. First thing we did was increase my exercise to 3 times a week. And within 1 week of doing that, I was back on top of my game. My focus was back, my motivation was back, and I was being productive again. So we all know these basic little things, but we need to be really intentional about doing them in order to harness our focus and not compromise it. The other thing that we need to do is recover from work, okay? Psychologically, if we look after our foundations, our exercise, nutrition, and sleep, we recover physically from work, but we've got to recover psychologically as well. And to do that, the science tells us that we need these 3 things. We need detachment. And so that's getting engaged in some sort of activity that allows us to stop thinking from work, to detach from work. So the question is, what activity do you do outside of work that allows you to stop thinking about work? All right. Do you have, and it doesn't matter what the activity is. It could be exercise. It could be some sort of a hobby. It could be hanging out with friends, right? It really doesn't matter what the activity is, but do you stop thinking about work? It's actually really important. The next one there is relaxation. Again, it doesn't matter what the activity is, but we've got to be able to relax our body. So it could be having a nice hot bath. It could be going for a sauna. It could be stretching or yoga or something like that. It doesn't really matter what the activity is, but do we take time to relax? And the final one is a sense of mastery, right? And this is where we set goals outside of work and we actually achieve them. We get progress towards mastery of something. And again, it has to be non-work related for this to work. And the way that it works, right, is that our workloads can be so big these days, and we can feel like if we work 24/7, we wouldn't, we just get nowhere. There's still work outstanding. We can feel really overwhelmed and powerless. But when we are setting goals and we are achieving them outside of work, we feel like if we're getting progress towards the mastery of something, then what it does is it restores our belief that if we invest time, energy, and effort into something, we can make a positive change. Okay? So what that does, it restores what we call in psychology our self-efficacy, which means we are more confident. It restores our confidence. And so that when we walk back into the workplace, we're actually more confident again. All right? And therefore, we have the ability and the belief that we need in order to harness our focus again. So again, doesn't matter what the goal is that we're working towards. It could be a fitness goal. It could be a hobby. It could be learning a new language. It could be playing a certain musical piece on a musical instrument. It could be writing a novel. It doesn't really matter, but it's gaining progress towards the mastery of something that's not work related. So what do you do for each of those things? Because unless you have something that allows you to achieve each of these qualities, you're not going to be able to, you're not going to have the capacity that you need to harness your focus as to the maximum potential when you're inside of work. Right? So that is principle number 4 around capacity. Okay. So look, we've got a little bit of time here, and in a couple of moments, I'll tell you how you can get that resource that are talking about the 6 clarity conversations that you need to have. But what I want to do now is just have a bit of space for some questions. I want you to think about what's resonated the most for you from today's presentation, because if you apply those 4 principles, you'll be able to harness your focus to a much greater degree. But I'm sure there are going to be some people there that are sitting there going, Cliff, this is awesome, but how do I apply it in this particular scenario? So I want to give you an opportunity. If you're online, just throw up your hand there, or if you're in the room, feel free to throw up your hand as well, and we'll throw to you in a moment. And so, is it Manoj? Manoj Sharma, I'll let you kind of jump off. So unmute.
Hi.
G'day. What's your question?
Yeah. Hello?
Yeah, I can hear. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
What's your question?
So I don't have any question, but I believe out of 4 principles. So
Yep.
most important is clarity conversation.
The clarity conversations.
Yeah,
Yeah, and which one do you think would benefit your team the most, Manish?
most is clarity conversation, and second one is this persistence.
Yeah, going right to the end, right? 100%.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else got any questions? I can see there's a hand raised in the room. Does someone want to?
Yeah, hi Cliff, this is Rohit here.
G'day,
Thank you
Rod.
for giving us a broad picture about this today's session. So my
Yep.
question today to you is, how can we measure the effectiveness of our clarity and focus? So means how do
Yeah.
we know that whether are we really focusing or we have a clarity on a particular thing? How do we measure the effectiveness of that?
Yeah, so it's a really good question, and often a hard one as well, right? Because there's an intangible element to clarity, right? And so one of the ways that you can measure that, right, is simply going on a scale of 1 to 10. How clear am I on this? And it may not be clarity, may not be the right measure or language there. Often when I'm doing it, it's more around. I'll ask I'll ask my team in particular if I kind of want to get a sense of how clear they are. I'll ask them a series of questions, and I'll say, okay, what needs to happen in this scenario, or what happens here. I'm not necessarily telling them, but I'm throwing questions to them to see if they know the answer. Because if they know the answer, then I know that they've got the clarity that they need. If they're giving me wrong answers, then I know that they're not clear enough. So that might be one process. The other one is, how confident are they in executing the plan that they've just stated? So again, on a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you? And if they come and say, a 6, okay, what would boost that to a 7 or an 8? What do you need in order to be more confident in executing the plan? And it might be that they have some questions, or they might need some support, or whatever it is. But often, if they've got the clarity that they need, they will be confident in the plan. If they don't have clarity, they don't have confidence. So that's the combination that I will often use to measure or get a sense of how clear my team are. I'll ask them a bunch of questions, right? And I'll ask them how confident they are. And that combination there is my usual approach. Does that help, Robert?
Yes, definitely. I've noted down what you have said. I'll work on it.
Very good.
Yeah.
Excellent. Does anyone else have any questions?
Hi, Clifford. This is Lloyd here.
Yep.
We spoke about detachment as one of the methods of building capacity.
Sorry, say that again.
Detachment. You
Yep.
explained about detachment as one of the
Yep.
ways. And since you also reference James Clear time and again,
Yep.
can it become a cue to distractions that we are trying to avoid in the first place? Detachments are something that you would do, take you off the work so that you can build capacity. So will it become a cue for distractions?
Will detachment become a cue for distractions?
Yeah.
So, okay. So first of all, your first question: what is detachment? Your detachment is detaching from work. Okay, it's stopping thinking about work. And so it's a bit like your brain needs a break. So if you're in the gym and you've got to do 100 bicep curls, all right? You don't pick up the weights and just do 100 straight because you'll fatigue too early. You won't get the 100 out. But if you pick up the weights, do a set of 10, put the weights down, have a break, okay? Then pick the weights up again, do another 10, right, and have a break. You'll get through your 100. Because what you're doing is you're giving your muscles a break and a rest in order to recover so that they can do the next lot of work. Now, when it comes to your brain is the same. If you are focusing and harnessing, all right, harnessing your focus and focusing your attention, it can only do it for so long before it gets tired. And so one of the things that we need to do is give our brains a break. If we go home and we are constantly working, we're still answering emails, we're working late into the night, we're thinking about the problems that we're going on, even if we're sitting at the dinner table and we're not actually engaging with our family, we're actually thinking about the problems that we're facing at work, okay, our brain never gets a break. And so what we need to do in order to recover, allow our brain and our mind to recover, is we need to give it a break. So what do we do to detach? Now, there are often two different strategies. One can be a routine or a habit that we use. And often people, when they go home from work, they will have some sort of routine that kind of allows them to they go through that automatically, their mind starts switching off. For some people, it might be getting changed. For some people, I know one particular guy, he's driving home and there's a particular overpass that he goes through. And he talks at it being the gate, right? So as soon as he goes home and he goes through the gate, he doesn't let himself think about work anymore. That's his ritual that allows him to detach from work. Okay. Now, the other strategy that we can use is have different activities so that we get so absorbed in that we're not thinking about work. All right. So my daughter is a bit of a swimmer, and she convinced me to jump in the pool and do laps with her at the end of last year. Now, when I'm doing laps in there, I can tell you there is one thing going through my head, right? And it's not thinking about work. It's just breathe, right? Keep breathing, okay? So for swimming might be a detachment activity because I'm so absorbed in the activity that I'm not thinking about work. So what we can do is we can use what might be a distraction while we're at work, might be a really healthy detachment-based activity after work. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it gives me clarity because I had a different perspective. Now the perspective is right. And your analogy of swimming makes sense.
Yep. Excellent. Cool. We've got time for probably one more question.
Hey, hi Claire. Yeah, I'm Jay Kumar this side. First of all, it's a great session. I think it was very simple to understand for all of us. There is a beautiful diagram which on the back of you, which has been having a just two arrow mark, which talk about your big picture and also the strategy. If you just see that largely the big picture, employees in the ground level may not able to understand the big picture of what the organization is having it. There will be always a gap between the management as well as an employee to understand that, because all the strategies is based on the big picture.
Yep.
So one thing you highlighted here is always you should have a conversation. That's what you just put the ring over there. Instead of having a larger gap, you try to have a conversation at the earlier stage, which you can able to bridge the gap. That's a good point which have been highlighted here. Is there is any other thing which we can able to do that to bridge the gap?
So what I would say, and often when I talk to I talk to senior leaders of large organizations, what I would say is their staff, and I'll say this to you guys, that your staff will be more capable of understanding the strategy than you think they are. If they don't understand the strategy, in most cases, it's because you haven't explained it well enough. And the chances are you may not understand it enough to be able to communicate it clearly enough. All right. So it might be on you as a leader to go and have a conversation with your manager, all right, so that you understand it and say, hey, I got to communicate this to my people. How can I communicate that in a more clearer way? Or sit down with your colleagues, the other people in the room, and say, hey, how have you communicated to your people? Because the more that you talk about it, the clearer it's going to be for you. And the clearer it is for you, the better you are going to be able to communicate it to your people. All right. Now, if you're still communicating really clear and there's still a capability gap, right? It may be because there's a level of experience or expertise or something that they haven't had. So my question, if I'm in your situation as a leader in the middle there, and people aren't kind of getting it, is, okay, what do I need to teach these people so that they can understand the bigger picture? All right. And it may be that I flick them, I do something in that space to develop their capability so that they can understand. For me, good leadership consists of two pillars. All right. The two pillars are driving performance, but also developing capability. And you need to do both. All right. Oh, I'm doing it again. I don't know what Teams does with these balloons and fireworks and all those sorts of things. I constantly set them off and I don't know what I'm doing to set them off. But there's the two pillars, right? Driving performance, developing capability. If you don't develop capability, you are limited to how much performance you can ever get out of your people. It's only through developing capability that you are able to drive performance increasingly and sustainably over the long term. And so if your people aren't understanding the strategy, you can't, it comes down to two things. One, are you communicating it clearly enough? Or two, do you need to develop them a little bit more so that they can understand that strategy, right? Either way, it's kind of your responsibility as a leader. That's my view on the world. So does that help?
Yeah, really. Thank you. Thank you for this answer.
Excellent. Awesome. Well, hey guys, so we're coming to the end of our time here today. So I promised this resource to you. For those of you that do have your phones that have put them away because they've been a distraction for you, now's the time where you can pull them out. So if you scan that QR code, what I'll also do for those that are online, I'll put the link here in the chat there. So that will allow you to download a copy of the document there, the six conversations that bring clarity to your team, right? And so it covers the 3 that we spoke about, but also 3 others that are there, okay? So just that is available there. And if anyone missed it, what I'll do is I'll send the link through to whether it's Vidya or PK, and they can distribute the link around to people so they don't miss out. All right. But guys, hey, it's been absolutely fantastic being with you all tonight here, this afternoon over there. I've had a good time. I hope you found it really valuable. And, harnessing your focus and gaining a greater level of clarity for your people is such a valuable thing. And it's one of those things that if you are able to do it, the more success you will have both individually and collectively. And that's just going to pay off in every area of your life. I wanted to leave you with this particular quote, right? Nothing can stand in the way of a man who has focused his entire self on a problem. All right, a great quote by Norman Vincent Peale, who was a great thinker back in the day. And I guess my parting comment to you would be that more people are more brilliant than they know they are. You are more brilliant than you know you are. Okay, and it's only through the harnessing of your focus, attention, your energy, and the clarity you can provide to those around you that you are able to maximize your potential and harness and experience that brilliance that lies deep within you and deep within the people around you. Okay, so all the best. Go, be focused, lead well. And maybe one day Paykel will get me back and we can have another chat at some other time. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Cliff. That's a very insightful session. We all want to focus and improve our focus, but thank you for helping us realize that it is very simple, and also letting us know that we are all brilliant. Then we are all brilliant individuals that way. Thank you so much, and hoping to see you soon somewhere else.
Yes. Catch you later, guys. Bye.